Hello and welcome to Digital Signage Explored. My name is Tim, and joining me this week is Jordan Feil from Jordan Feil's Consulting. Jordan, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Tim. Great to be here with you.
I appreciate you coming on, and we actually have some similarities in terms of our previous history, in terms of our job roles, and now you've gone into full-time consultancy for yourself. Could you give a little bit of a background as to where you were before that?
Absolutely. So I started my career in the digital signage software industry a little over 16 years ago. I was working for a company called X2O Media in Montreal. They were bought and sold a couple times to Barcode, to Stratacache, and they're still operating today, but in a slightly different space. After that, I worked for another company called Navori Labs for about 6 years. So Navori is a Swiss-based company with offices in Montreal and other cities around the world. And once that came to an end, I decided to kind of take my talents in another direction and offer digital signage consulting and digital signage services to different types of companies all over the world. And I'm just in the early first few months of that venture, but so far so good.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And I really appreciate you coming on. We had a chat just before this just to talk about what would be interesting for us to cover, what makes a lot of sense, because we have quite a lot of, I don't like to use the word, but synergy in terms of our history and what we've done. It would be good to kind of tackle some of the basics. So coming back to basics with digital signage, because we both kind of found a similar thread, which is that a CMS it isn't magic. It doesn't have the capability of just pulling all of the things you need to do digital signage with together. It's a very
Mhm.
useful tool to do that, but what else do you need to consider through that experience, right?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, a lot of folks, when they're shopping for digital signage software out on the market, they get so interested and almost obsessed with the cool and the wow features. And you know, at the end of the day, what I often tell them is kind of what you just said, where it's software, it's not magic. And what typical end users need to realize in those early days, of course, it's so important to find a really great quality digital signage software and CMS and also quality hardware, whether you're going media player or system on chip. But at the end of the day, it's more your job as the user to make the software look good rather than the job of the software to make you look good, because ultimately you can go and shop for a beautiful car and it may look great in the showroom, but if you don't really know how to drive it or you can't take advantage of its engine and how it's set up or any of those things, the end result or the end resulting feeling may not be that great. And you'll say, this car is supposed to be so much better, but if you don't really take the time to learn how to use it, how to take advantage of what makes it great, what makes it special, it's just going to perform like any other car, if you will. Maybe a lousy analogy, but I think you catch my drift.
I think that's a great analogy. I totally agree with you. And I think even some people get more out of worse software just by being familiar with it. And I think the one thing to take into consideration when looking at software choices is, does it tick the boxes of what I need it to do? And then, honestly, is a question of going, do I have the time to sit down and really get to know this tool?
That second part is really so important. Folks say, oh, we got the best software and we've got some decent starting content, but at the end of the day, taking the time to actually learn it and learn it properly and learn the ins and outs, and not just learn it, but also at the end of the day, most software platforms will give you a number of different ways to get the job done, especially if you're collaborating with other users that are in your office or elsewhere in the world. Not just learning it, but figuring out what are the best workflows for you and your team. The features may not change, but how you use it and how you set things up to allow for collaboration, approvals, testing, things along those lines, it's so important. And a lot of people overlook that in the early days. They get their hands on the software and they say, hey, it looks easy. I'm just going to load it up with all the content and it's going to be fantastic. And a year down the road, they look back and say, ooh, we really could have started off with this in a much different way, set it up in a different way, and figured out how to operate it easily within our company in a totally different way.
Yeah, I think that's really important because you say that there are different ways to slice it, and multiple softwares will have different ways of approaching it. And it's easier to make that decision and to spend the time and make that decision in the early days before you get everyone trained up and you have a process, and then you have to kind of unpick that bundle and redesign it. It's definitely worth spending that time to invest that time into that as well.
For
So,
sure. And going back afterwards to rejigger things around and change the work, it's doable no matter what software it is, but it's going to be a bit of a pain in the you know where. And you're much better off taking a slow and steady and measured approach once you get your hand on the system before you get all your users in and add all the stuff, add all the content and the presentations. Sit back and let them play with it and let them learn how it works. Put a test player or a test screen in their offices so that when they're publishing things, they'll see in real time what it's going to look like. Doing that initial planning, training, testing, whatever you want to call it, is so important. It's going to save you a lot of time and headaches in the long run.
I think that's where this kind of the consultative approach comes in, and also the support that you can get from the CMS or the reseller, whoever else is involved in that, just to really flesh out your concept. And even if it's just a simple G sheet and you just put down, look, these are the list of pieces of content that we need to deliver. These are the different territories or regions or zones or however you break that down. And what is the easiest way to distribute that? Because the goal is the least amount of playlists possible, right? The most unified way of delivering content while still having the flexibility.
100%. I've done a lot of training for different customers, end users out there. And what I've explained to them at the end of the day, you want to figure out the best workflow so that your users and your employees or your colleagues can achieve the best end result with the least amount of clicks possible. Because something that I recognize working with a lot of end users over the years is that in a lot of companies that are running digital signage, the people that are actually in charge of updating the content and maintaining it, it's like 5% of their overall day-to-day job. So they don't necessarily want to take that, oh, I'm going to immerse myself and become an expert in this software. They're thinking to themselves, well, for some, this is almost a little annoying. So I just want to get in there, upload the stuff that they're asking me to do, click publish, and then go on with my day because I'm so busy. So really, those setting up those initial workflows and some of that initial training is so important.
100%. Well, actually, that leads to one of the first questions, which is kind of around content and how people are preparing their content for their first rollout. And what do you see error-wise? What are people making mistakes on when it comes to their first time kind of loading out content for digital signage?
So I typically see two or three. One, just making sure that your content is in the right size and resolution for the displays you're ultimately going to play it on. If you're running 4K screens and you're uploading 720p content, it may not look the absolute best. If you have landscape screens and you're trying to upload some portrait content to them, it will play, but it's not going to look great, right? So one of the key tips that I give to folks when they're first starting out or designing their content is when you're building that content and when you're testing it, seeing how it looks before you put it out in public facing screens, you need to have access to a screen that is the size of those you have in the field, whether it's in your office or in a test area or in a conference room. Because the way the content may look in the CMS ultimately may look a little bit different when it's out there on the big screen out in the field. So it's very easy to get, if you've ever built a PowerPoint for a corporate presentation or for your work, you're doing it on your computer, you say, oh, it looks fantastic. Then you get to the big boardroom, put it up there on a 90-inch screen, and you say, ooh, it doesn't quite look the same. It's not how I thought it was going to look. So there's things like that, definitely. And then the two others, one, I would say things simple. Okay, obviously you want to have flashy content, you want to get people's attention, stuff like that. Never forget the ultimate goal of the digital signage, which generally is to put the viewers or have the viewer, you want the viewers to be able to consume the information you're putting out there. So
Yeah.
if you put too many animations and wild crazy things swinging from the top of the screen, or it may look interesting, it may look cool, but you're taking away from the end goal of the signage, which is to get the viewers to consume the messaging or the content you're looking to put out to them. So I would say keep things simple. And the last one is just understanding what the content is. And I'll explain a little bit more. For example, I see folks that are putting up a big image advertisement maybe, and there's a lot of text on there. There's a lot of details, date and time of a specific event, and 5, 6, 7 lines of text. They'll take that content, put it in their playlist to play for 10 seconds. And really, they're not recognizing that if someone actually wanted to read everything that is on that piece of content,
Yeah.
it's going to take a lot more than 10 seconds to do it.
Yeah.
So be aware of your durations, how long things are going to be up on screen, and actually give people the time to consume the content that you're trying to get them to consume.
And one of the things that I've actually spoken about in the past is actually sitting in your area, wherever your screen's going to be, and just watch the traffic flow and see how much time do I have with this individual. Is it 5 seconds? Is it 10 seconds? Is it a waiting room where I might have several minutes? And then kind of not only considering the amount of content on the screen, because it should always be relatively minimal, but like how long can my playlist be? If my playlist is going to be a minute long and I've only got 10 seconds if someone walks past, 50 seconds of my content isn't doing anything for most of the audience. So we're separating the audience visibility at that point, and our content then doesn't become as effective.
Correct. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
So, what would you advise, obviously from your background and now going into consultancy, what do you typically advise, is the number one thing you'd say to get the most out of a CMS? What would you start?
Ooh, I mean, first of all, you've got to learn how it works and not just the absolute basics, but get into detail, learn all the tools, all the features, and do some testing. A lot of folks I've talked to are doing content management for digital signage. They're putting content up on big screens all over the city, country, what have you, but they never actually watch what it looks like in the real world. They don't have a screen of a similar size or resolution or orientation in their office or that they have access to, or they can actually see what it's going to really look like. Maybe getting a bit off topic here, but get out of the office, go to where some of those screens actually are in the real world, and go and look at them. Look at them from different angles, different viewing distances, things like that. And doing something that simple typically will open the eyes of the content manager and say, oh my goodness, I was kind of going about this the wrong way. I've got to make the fonts bigger because nobody's actually standing 5 feet from the screen. They're going to be 100 feet. Little things like that. But really getting out there into the real world, and it may be your screens, and it can even today, it's hard to go anywhere where you're not seeing digital signage displays, whether it's a retail store, public transportation, or whatever it might be. So I always recommend, and this is not for the about the software itself, but just start noticing all the screens that are out there and around you, whether it's in the airport when you're waiting for a flight, and just get a sense for what people are doing, what works well, what looks good to you, and what doesn't. And you'll start to build these ideas within your head based on real world experience. And that will take you so much further in doing your own work, building your own content, and coming up with the right content schemes that you feel resonate in the real world. So, really get out of the office, see this stuff in real time, and just start noticing because it's everywhere. And you'll start picking up really good and great ideas just by keeping your eyes open out there.
100%. And actually, I can really resonate with something that you just said there because I've literally just come back from an airport yesterday. And airports are the best place to go and see digital signage. They are chock full of it, whether that be LED banners or whether it be the stores that are 100% dedicated digital signage across the entranceway. So there's nothing but digital signage across it. And it seems to be one of these places that really take effect on it. And it's most likely because of the value of the captured audience that you have there. You're sitting in your waiting area. You can't leave until your plane gets there. You typically turn up 2 hours early. You've got that time to kill. So this is such a guaranteed pool of individuals there that are bored, they're looking to buy something, they're looking to be distracted, they're looking for anything just to keep themselves occupied. And yeah, airports are one of the best places. They're also one of the best places to find failures in digital signage as well. I was out there
100%.
I was out there the other day. I saw 3 screens that were just dead. I saw pixels that were dead on big LED boards, especially for the flight information. And I looked at that and I just said, that needs updating. And that's one of the things that was my takeaway is, as well as implementing and planning your digital signage, you need to have a plan of action for when things go wrong, because they will. There will be player outages, there will be power issues, there will be something that happens. And whether that's having your own internal plan of what that strategy is and what the chain of conversation is to get that fixed, or having a support system in place, whether that be a third-party contractor, whether that be an installer, just thinking about that in advance, because if you've got 100 or 200 devices across multiple locations, nothing's bulletproof. There will be something that goes wrong, and you should just prepare for that. Obviously, if you do your due diligence properly, that won't be very frequently, but it's always worth having that in the back of mind.
100%, because it's so important that to recognize that avoiding mistakes and avoiding failures is almost as or more important than taking that content the extra mile to develop something that's even more fantastic or even more flashy or even more eye-catching. Because I mean, maybe I'm biased because I've been in this industry for so long, but nothing turns me off from a brand, a business, a company more than if I'm in their location, whether it's retail, transport, QSR, whatever it might be, and there are screens that are down, that are blank, that are showing error messages, that are showing the dreaded blue screen of death. You'd be better off showing the most basic sort of lousy piece of content than having those errors showing. So one thing I tell folks is when you're choosing hardware, software, and even making content, obviously you want to keep things cool and flashy and engaging and so on, but avoiding big mistakes, avoiding failures, whether content or otherwise, is so, so important because while your signage can bring you eyeballs, ad impressions, new customers, things like that, The opposite is equally true. Blank screens, error messages, stuff like that. People are going to say, oh my, these guys just don't have their act together. Maybe I'm going to go to the next store down there that looks really cool and sharp. You know?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that there are fail safes that you can build into that. For example, if you're looking at standalone devices like Bright Signs or Chrome or whatever it might be, you plan into your installation that you're going to have an additional device sitting behind there that's pre-configured. So if something goes wrong, any staff member should be able to just plug in an HDMI cable and a power cable. You can remotely manage the rest of it. That's not going to be on them, the staff members, whoever it might be. But it just gives you that fail-safe to be like, something's gone wrong. We can go and fix that. If it becomes, more urgent, then we might have to call someone out. But to save the day, having one device additionally that sits in the background is well worth having.
The cashier, the sales representative, they're going to say, oh my, they're going to panic and say, oh my God, I'm not a tech guy. I don't know you know what, today, if you don't know what an HDMI cable or you haven't plugged an HDMI cable into something in your whole life, I don't know what planet you're living on.
Yeah.
But it's become a lot easier and a lot more accessible that in those emergency situations, someone should be able to unplug a dongle from behind the screen, plug in a new one, and just walk away. Shouldn't be that hard. But setting up for success, planning for simple failure, stuff like that, is so important and often goes overlooked, especially when companies are getting into digital signage for the first time.
Yeah, 100%. And that actually leads me on to a question I did want to talk to you about, which is where are the missteps that typically happen? Kind of worst case scenarios when you go, oops, I've made the wrong decision on, maybe there's three factors. There's the hardware, there's the actual content itself, and then there's the CMS. What are the outcomes of making the wrong decision of those three?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, it really depends where you're going wrong. One topic that I can jump into sort of right off the bat is encouraging people to go with professional caliber devices and hardware and software. I may make some people upset that watch this, but for example, I hear a lot of people talking about Raspberry Pi. I could be wrong, and maybe I'm just biased, but when I hear companies getting started with digital signage, like, you know what, we're going to use Raspberry Pi players. They're so cheap and we can get them shipped from wherever. And let's just start with that. We don't want to invest in the more professional grade hardware, professional grade players. If someone said that to me, I'm going to say, well, let's back it up a little bit. If you really want to get going with digital signage, you want it to enhance your brand, enhance your internal corporate communications, whatever it might be, spend the few extra bucks and buy professional grade hardware, professional grade media players. And the same goes for screens. I see some end users that are like, you know what, we're going to run out to Walmart or to Costco and get some consumer displays. And they might not know that there's even a difference. But I would say get yourself some quality hardware and make sure that the CMS and software you've chosen works well with that hardware. You
Yeah,
call up
the
your
hardware
CMS
one.
and say, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's the hardware ones. It's really important because in the past we've supported devices which were lower level, and then kind of decided as a company we're just not going to support these anymore because it's not that it isn't functional. It's that it's so limiting. It doesn't allow for future progress. In 3 years' time, everything becomes defunct, and typically you'll see limitations in the experience, and it makes it much harder to guarantee that the product you're about to receive is going to do everything that it says it can do effectively. It might say we can do multiple zones of content. You can run an RSS ticker, you can run video, you can whatever you want to make your content really shine. And then you go, however, if you're running on one of these devices, maybe it's not going to be the best experience, and you might be okay, you might not. And that's not the way to build out your system.
Correct. And I applaud that decision of your company, partly because one, you're going to get a lot more support calls if your users are using cheaper devices or non-professional type devices. You're also protecting yourself from having your software look bad.
Right.
If people are using certain devices and all the screens are having trouble or your 4K videos are glitching and people saying, what are you using we're using that company's software. I guess it's just not that good. When really it might be the media player behind the display or the super low-end system on chip display that just can't handle what you're asking it to do.
100%. Yeah, and there's definitely a time delay on that too. We've got some older screens here that have been around for 5 years, and they're definitely end of life, and we're very kind to them and we're gentle with them in the content that they get. They just get some full screen images, maybe an MP4 file here and there, but we know it can't. Time has changed and hardware is now much more robust than it used to be. But there's still always the effective slide down on price. And also, typically, if you're doing this from any kind of professional business level, buy something that is designed for the business. Design something that has a longer warranty, something that's allowed or kind of been tested to run 24/7, has the support behind it, that it's been validated. And the benefits there, you also typically get much better quality product that manages heat dispersion better, just things that you wouldn't typically have to worry about in a home environment.
100%. And that's why partly why I love getting into sort of the consulting is to kind of protect people, protect end users, companies from kind of making those wrong decisions early on where they may not think that it's going to make a difference. And it may not make a difference in the first 30 days or 90 days or first few months, but you start leaving these screens on 24/7, 365, you're going to start getting burn-in, you're going to start losing pixels, things like that. And like I said in one of our other topics we talked about, digital signage done poorly can really make you look bad, can make your company look bad, not just the signage. You walk into a bank and half of their screens are down, you're going to say, is this the company that I want to trust to keep all of my money and all my savings and so on? Obviously, it's a bit of an extreme example that I'm giving you, but it's like if you walk into a dentist office and they've got, it's happened to me before, and they've got all their diplomas lined up on the wall, there's like 15 different things, and they're all crooked a little bit. Well, I'm here for you to make my teeth straight and look good, but all the things you're hanging are crooked. Like that, for me, it just gives me a really bad feeling. And the same can be true about digital signage.
That's a very specific, and I totally get what you're saying, but that is such an accurate reflection of going, oh, if the pictures aren't straight, then my teeth won't be.
Something like that.
I really like that analogy. And I think it is the same. And taking it back to simplicity, there are so many content providers nowadays. We do a lot of work with screen feed as an example, menus and QSR as another really good example, where you don't have to be an expert in this. In the world of AI coming into fruition, you could pretty much create your content structure, go to one of these parties and say, this is the piece of content that I'm looking for, put it all together, put it into some kind of calendar and system, upload it into your CMS, and it'll look good. You know, it doesn't.
100%. I think you hit on an important topic there, which is a lot of companies that I talk to and they're getting their screens up and running, or maybe they have them all and they're just saying, Jordan, we're having a hard time filling the airspace. Like we just don't have bandwidth to create enough content to keep things fresh all the time. And I'll tell them, you actually have a lot more content than you think you do. And if you really don't, sign up with a screen feed who I love their content and so on, or somebody similar that can just ingest data and information from your company and spit it out in a nice prefab way with nice graphics, nice layouts, everything is displaying nicely and so on. I'll also say things like, well, do you have a corporate PowerPoint deck that you update every quarter? I don't love PowerPoint for signage, but it's an example. Do you have certain pages on your website that are really well done, that look good, that display certain upcoming events or certain announcements? Well, why not display that web page from your site as a piece of digital content in the rotation as well? And now you're starting to updating automatically, and you're not just displaying the same old content over and over and over again. And sorry to keep on blathering on here, but you asked me about common mistakes that people make is they'll get really into it in the first couple months and put all kinds of content, and then they'll just kind of forget about it and they'll leave the same content running there for the next 9 months. And then you look around and you see nobody's even noticing the screens. Nobody's even looking at them. Why? Well, because they're seeing the same thing over and over again. Eventually, they'll just start ignoring them.
Yeah, there's definitely signage fatigue. That's the reason for having digital signage. I mean, if you're going to do that, there's a genuine, I've said this a couple of times in the past, is that's a genuine possibility where you might go, actually, maybe we don't need digital here. Maybe we just need a poster. If it's going to be once a year, it's probably going to be cheaper to do a poster. But there's so much value left on the table if you want to do digital. I'd always kind of advise going, have a real sit down and go, who's going to be responsible for this? What amount of time and effort does this take? How can we alleviate some of that effort by pulling in automated content, by pulling in third-party content? Obviously, we want to make sure it's on brand, which all the tools are out there to do. But it's more about keeping consistent messaging and keeping it regularly refreshed. And some of that depends on your audience. That's not necessarily always the same case. If you're in a tube station or an event location that maybe people will go to once a year, your cycle of new content is probably going to be much slower than if you're in a corporate business in an office space where it's the same people in the same office every day. They need new content more regularly.
100%. But a lot of this, I mean, in my opinion, comes back to, let's say, live data. And I'm not just talking news, weather, traffic, stuff like that. But if you're in a corporation, you build a digital signage template that maybe is showing sales data for the current quarter or current month or something. Instead of baking it into an image and uploading that image and just leaving it there, choose a digital signage software that can, out of the box, bring in data from the software tools that you're already using, whether it's Tableau, Power BI, Microsoft Dynamics, whatever it might be. That way, you only have to build the template, layout, and design once. But since you've actually connected to a dynamic source, the data and the content is actually always changing, and you don't actually have to touch it. It's just happening automatically. So, what I tell to a lot of folks in corporate is make sure if you want to be displaying corporate news, corporate events, sales data, production statistics, things like that, that's a fantastic use case for digital signage because it's information that people always want to know. They always want to see the latest numbers, see where they stand, and so on. So just know where your data lives, what systems you're using, and when shopping for digital signage, go and find one that integrates seamlessly and out of the box with
Yep.
those.
And it's all fully automated at that point. Your digital signage isn't extra
Correct.
work. It's just emulating your voice across the business without having to be inundated by emails or Slack messages or Teams or whatever it is that you're using for your internal communication. It gets overwhelming. And that information
Exactly.
that's most prominent should just sit above and in front of you at all times.
There you go. There you
Perfect.
go.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much for your time.
Hey,
Appreciate
it's
you
my
coming on
pleasure.
and chatting with me. Where can people find you?
Sure. Well, you can find me online at my website. It is jordanfeil.com. Feel free to reach out to me there. You'll see my email address, phone number. You can always email me, contact@jordanfeil.com. I'm open to a lot of different types of opportunities. I work in a lot of different spaces within digital signage, whether it's content, hardware, software, training, support, things along those lines. So feel free to reach out. At the very least, we'll have a nice quick conversation and go our separate ways. But should you need help with anything to do with your digital signage, whether existing or future plans, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to chat.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for watching. I've been Tim Baker. We're here from Digital Signage Explored. We're trying to make a community of individuals that are either thought leaders or experts or even customers that understand the digital signage process to help other people engage with the tool, to understand the value, to get more out of it and be able to grow better digital signage networks. So if you yourself would like to come on the show, feel free to reach out to me, or if you know someone, then do let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us and we'll see you again on the next one.